Hello and welcome to the Recovering from Divorce, a survival guide and workshop. My name is Kent Philpott. This is my wife Katie, and we have led a number of workshops over the years. In fact, we're coming into our 26th year of doing workshops for people, helping them to recover from the loss of relationship, usually from divorce. Sometimes people aren't divorced. They're thinking about it. Some people have ended a relationship, and the whole point is to recover from this circumstance. And Katie, you've been through divorce?
I have been through a divorce, and of course you've been through a divorce, and we are married to one another now, so this is two people sitting before you who have been through it. We've been there, done that. We know how it goes. We've each been through the process for ourselves and have experienced all of the various stages that we are going to cover in the next 10 sessions. This one is an introduction. We will have 8 weeks of sessions covering the various stages, and then we will have a concluding session.
So this is the first of 10 sessions then. And it's very difficult to kind of go through this by yourself. If you have one or two other people who would care to go through this with you, it would be probably beneficial. Important to have somebody to talk to about what you're feeling, what the emotions that you're experiencing. We're going to impart some information, and that's an important part of it. To know what is going on. But if you would benefit the most, I think maybe invite a couple of people to go through it with you. When we get into the 8 sessions that form the heart of it, there are questions that will come up at the end that are intended for group discussion. And so that there may be some help there. Now, loss, Katie, loss. There are a lot of different kind of losses.
There's loss of any kind of relationship. There's a loss of relationship, of course, due to the divorce, due to separation, due to death. 2 people that I know have just lost their longtime husbands or wives just in the last month. And we've had yet another one in our church that someone who has lost their loved one, a dear friend of ours. So through death is a large way in which people do experience loss. And it can even be loss of other kinds, not just of relationship with people.
Yes, a lot of people have their homes foreclosed on them. They've lost jobs. Even the loss of a pet, having to leave a home, leave a community. There are many different kinds of losses, and the loss experience, surprisingly, is very similar, one loss to another. There is a predictable cycle that you actually go through. It's surprisingly textbook. Some people are shocked at that. Some people find comfort. We have a tendency to think when we're going through loss, and you know, my divorce, I know Katie's divorce, many people, when those relationships end, we've never experienced anything quite as traumatic as that. We thought, I've been through difficult times, but nothing comparing to this. So the loss experience is very broad, it's predictable, it's textbook, and some people, as I say, take comfort that they're not going crazy.
No.
They're not alone. In fact, more than half of America has experienced divorce. And if you'd add their children to that number, you're probably looking at something like 65% of the population has in some way been impacted by the ending of relationships. And so this is not a trivial pursuit. No. I know that ladies, we know in our workshop that we run, mostly ladies come.
Right, but the men come too, and I've seen the men come back again years later, and they're either working with a new relationship now that's in trouble, or they're finally processing some of what they should have processed earlier and they didn't.
So when we go through this, we're going to be addressing the people who are watching this. We're going to address you as our 102nd workshop. We're just beginning in real life time with the group, our 101st workshop. So those watching this, you will be our 102nd workshop, and we're going to go through the process. And of course, this is very similar to the introduction we would normally use for a live group. One of the messages that we like to carry about recovery is that you will recover. We've learned that you will recover. We've recovered to a degree. I'd like to say
To a degree.
To a degree. Particularly if you have children, there's a certain saying, divorce never ends. It continues to follow you. Loss through death follows us. I lost my brother after he came back from Vietnam. That's a long time ago now. My mother is gone. My father is gone. Of course, my grandparents are gone. Katie, you've had losses.
My mother is gone, and a very close friend of mine just a month ago, for instance, is something that we actually can experience almost as deeply as a divorce if our lifelong best friend, for instance, has died or has moved so far away that we can't contact them.
And the point is that there is a certain sense in which you never completely recover. When we've experienced a significant loss, the impact of that will follow us throughout our entire life. In divorce, particularly when there have been children. However, we still go through the process of recovery, and it gets better as time goes on. Though we never ever completely get over any loss that we have. Now, it's important to understand that grief is a natural process. It's one that really is centered on our emotions. For example, we're going to talk about denial.
Yes.
We're going to talk about guilt. We're going to talk about fear. We're going to talk about anger. We're going to talk about letting go and other things.
Sadness and loneliness.
Sadness, loneliness. They're emotions. So, we don't place a value judgment on any of this. That you are going through the process of recovery has nothing to do with good or bad.
And we ask that you don't do that to yourself either. We are not going to do it to you. We ask that you do not put that kind of judgment on yourself either, because what it will do will be to deny and submerge that particular feeling, emotion, or stage of recovery, and it will subvert it. It will damage your chances of working through it as you should.
So there are emotions, and it's not a question then of good and bad. You cannot help the recovery process. You are going to go through grief. You're going to experience it. And the problem is if you don't deal with it. I have a story. A woman who came in our second workshop, I think it was in March of 1986. And she had been married for 20 years, divorced. She had been single for another 10 years, and then she got remarried, married another 10 years. This woman was about as old as I am. And then the second marriage began to fall apart. She went to a therapist, and the therapist said, you never processed the first divorce. And what's happening is, because you didn't process the first one, even still, with 30 and now 40 years, you never really processed any of the losses. And so she came to 2 workshops back to back. The first time she worked on the first one, which was 20 years old, and then she began to work on the second, and the second time through. So time is not necessarily a healing factor.
Now, we also have an experience a couple of workshops ago, almost on the other side of the spectrum, in which a woman came to us and she said, I can't believe I'm still going through this. When is this going to end? And we asked her, oh my, how long has it been? Thinking she was going to say 10, 20 years. She said, it's been a whole month.
A whole month. So, you know, people have varying experiences with this thing. And, you know, one of the common questions is, how long will it take me to recover? Now, here's what the experts say. And by the way, I want to make it clear. Katie and I are not experts. We have not got PhDs and doctors of education behind us. That's not so. We have masters between us and 1 doctorate degree, but not in the area of psychology, social science, and that sort of thing. We're not therapists. We've simply been through loss, and we've had a lot of experience in workshops, in divorce recovery and loss workshops. And for example, Katie and I do this. We both facilitate, and I always take the people who have had loss through death. But the time factors of recovery greatly vary.
Yes.
I have a scary statistic for you. This one, when I mention it, people
cringe. Yes.
They go, oh no. Some experts say you take the number of years you were together, divide by 2, and that's how long it's going to take. That's how long it's going to take.
So the woman who had been in a 20-year marriage that then ended should have spent that next 10 years working and recovering rather than denying and submerging, because that's how long it should have taken her.
Yeah. And, you know, why do people deny, though? Why do people not want to face it? Because it's painful. It's painful.
And it's work.
It's work. It's painful. And when you take the bandage off that's been slapped there, the pain's going to happen. It's not uncommon in the first week of a workshop when we get started with this kind of material to have people literally stand up, walk out, because the pain of facing it is too much. Now, recovery time, go back to that. Half the time you were together, I personally found that to be true. I personally found that was exactly the truth. It took a long time for me to recover. But we want to make it clear that recovery time begins not when the relationship ends, but when you begin to process.
Right. The old adage, time heals all wounds, that ain't so.
It's not so.
Just time alone doesn't do the trick. You have to actually do the work during the time, or the time might as well not have even been spent.
So the clock begins running once you begin to consciously process and talk about what happens. Now, in our workshop, I want to bring this up because I think it's a kind of an important thing. And when people want to know why are we doing what do we got? If you got some special magic, you got some special answers, we say no. What we're doing is we're trying to provide a safe place to talk about what happened. And we divide our workshop into 45 minutes of presentation, 45 minutes of small group work, where we have our facilitators and we talk about the questions. And everybody says it's in the talking about the questions that things really help. That's the thing that means the most to everyone. But it's the conscious effort of looking at things and getting real, getting honest about what happened, that healing begins to take place. Now, back again to how long does it take?
Mm-hmm.
Other experts say it takes about a year of being alone. When the dust is cleared and then you're by yourself, a year alone. Other experts have said it takes about 3 years on average for a lot of people to get over the majority of the grief process. Now, what's the truth? I don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
I've just seen people who have said, I've been working on it for many years, I'm still not through it. Other people seem to be through it relatively quickly. Some people in between. I don't know how it is.
And some people, they say they're over it, and then they'll come back to a workshop, perhaps a couple years after that, and said, I fooled myself. I wasn't over it. I simply stopped at a certain stage and thought it was over and went on again.
Right.
And I remember about my own that it was about this divide by half scenario, at which it wasn't a sense of I'm over this. It was a sense of now I can take responsibility for my role in it, which we will get to in another session. But that's when I counted that I had recovered enough to be very balanced in my view of it.
One of the things we've noticed in a workshop is that mostly there are men who come, and I know a little bit about this. Men like to think that they don't need help, that we just sort of macho our way through this thing, not realizing that we're doing ourselves an incredible amount of emotional, mental, and physical damage. Part of the recovery process is learning to be content and at peace with yourself rather than being in stress. And stress, as everybody knows, is the big killer. Now, that's what causes so many physiological problems and moves us to a place of dis-ease or disease. So there are all kinds of great reasons for recovering. We recover for ourselves because we want to live a good life. We want more life. We would like more love in our life. We recover for our children. We recover being able to live a healthy life, being able to continue and function well at our jobs and so on. So the stakes for recovery are quite high. It's a very important process. And men have a tendency to think, I don't need to do this. I can just work through it. And a lot of times men are a little bit more capable of ferreting through some things, but underneath it all, it's all still there. You can watch it for a while, but it really doesn't go away. We've found that is so.
There's an aspect to that in which there's a fairly common idea that women like to be in groups and talk to one another about very intimate and personal things. That may be the case, and that may be why women are attracted to the workshop in greater numbers. But men actually do as well in those groups once they realize the benefit of them.
Yes, that's true. So what happens is there's a rebuilding process to go through. Not always real easy. It's not exactly the thing that you'd rather do. You'd rather be doing a lot of other things, but there is a rebuilding process to go through. A little bit at a time. Doesn't happen quickly. Sometimes people will start the 8-week workshop and they'll wonder, get to the end of it, and they'll say, Am I healed yet? Am I okay again? Am I recovered? And we say no.
If they have to ask that question, yes.
They've made a lot of progress. I've seen some stunning progress in an 8-week workshop. I mean, people who would sit there and cry for the first couple of 3 sessions, and by the the last session, they're enjoying themselves. They can hardly wait to come back, and they seem to be just altogether different. Some of the early powerful emotions has lost its grip on them, and they are beginning to be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more comfortable. Mm-hmm. So
there is a caution that I experienced with a friend of mine who lost his wife of 30 years, and she was a very good friend of mine, and he was calling me on the phone quite a bit, and he was venting quite a bit with his anger, and about a week later he said, "Well, I think I'm over this anger now." And I said, "Well, maybe for," and I looked at my watch, but we go in and out of various stages. Sometimes one stage will make its kind of rear its ugly head for a while and go away, and we may be a little bit fooled into thinking that we are past this part of the whole process now, and lo and behold, it comes back up maybe a month later, several months, a year later, and we get blindsided by it and are just kind of floored. And that will be something that we will have to kind of reiterate during our sessions of don't be surprised when these things come back around again.
Another point we'd like to make on this is that when we go through the sessions, and the next session we're going to look at, the very first one we call shock and denial, some watching will have already been past that. We may be in the area of fear or loneliness, sadness, and people haven't got there yet. You'll actually only be at one little segment. We might hit where you're at, the stage of your recovery and the grief process, only for a very short time. And the other parts you can learn. People get master's degrees in learning how to become educated about the grief process, and it's a very important part of what we're talking about, the recovery process. And when you learn it for yourself, and you'll always have that, there are many losses in our lives, and the older we get, the more losses there tend to be. But you not only learn it for yourself, but you learn it for other people as well. We get recovered. We learn the process of recovery for grief. We can help our kids go through that, or a friend, an associate, or somebody else, because we're constantly associated with all kinds of people who are going to experience loss. And so learning this process is more than for yourself. It can actually be something that you can give to other people, help them to recover. So we're only going to meet where you're at for only maybe a half of a program. But you may get there, and you very likely will get there. And even if, as I said, you're past that, still there's some things to learn, maybe to apply it to other people at different points. I want to bring up here, I think it's time to bring up this book. This is a book called Rebuilding When Your Relationship Ends, by Bruce Fisher and Robert Alberti. This is the 3rd edition. This is the finest piece of work I have ever seen on divorce and recovery. You can get it at any bookshop, any place that sells books. Easy to get, relatively inexpensive. I think it's about $12 now. You can get used copies, but it is incredible.
And he has his own website for rebuilding, so you can find that fairly easily. We don't have the exact address for it, but Bruce Fisher, and that's without a C, and rebuilding, if you type that into a search engine, you'll come up with it fairly easily.
That's right, and it is a book to have and read maybe a couple of times over. I've read a lot of books on divorce and separation and the grief process, but this book is the best I've ever seen, and we use it in our workshop. It is a regular part of our workshop.
Do we want to talk about the small group process at this point or a little bit later?
Well, we can talk about that. In the small group process, we have ground rules. The ground rules are that we want to talk about our feelings and our emotions. We try to avoid the frustrating, angry talk about lawyers, real estate agents, because we got to sell a property, division of property, and all the things that go on. Just a complete nightmare. So very often, tendency to talk about that. So we like to have feeling level conversations. Another thing is confidentiality. That we have to be able to be free to talk about what really happened and how we really feel. Remember, what we feel that we do in our workshop is to provide a safe place to talk about what happened, a safe environment to talk about what happened, and that confidentiality is a major part of maintaining that safe environment. Can you remember anything else about?
We agree that we will not comment to one another or ask questions of one another, especially not why, especially not tell me more, tell me names, tell me dates. We really want to be there for the other people, to listen to them. There will be, for us, a group moderator, a facilitator who will make sure that people are not stepping on one another and interrupting one another and asking one another questions, that people get a chance to go around the group and have their say, their turn. And so we're not going to respond to one another. There are situations when people even ask, please give me some advice. And it's up to our moderators or our facilitators to say, we're not really prepared to do that. We're going to listen to you, and we're not going to give you advice. We can tell you what happened to us. We can tell you some of the results of what happened to us when we made decisions in certain ways, but we're not going to give advice.
All right, well, we're winding down this program, so this is going to end session number 1. We're going to begin. The next session is going to be shock and denial. We're going to get with the process of recovery from loss. So long.